Tim, thank you so much for joining the podcast. I know from our pre chat that you have a very powerful story, and I am so grateful that you're just spending time with us. So, thanks so much for joining the show.
Thanks for having me. I always enjoy talking to people who, like yourself, who are doing holistic things and life coaching, and just talking about how life can be difficult sometimes, but we find ways to kind of get through those moments.
Yes. And I think, as you share your story, and we'll talk about some of the healing modalities and things that you are using and incorporating into your life, you're going to inspire a lot of people. And so, with that, Tim, can you just share a bit about yourself and your story with me and the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just a normal guy. I live in Ohio in the middle of nowhere, north of Columbus, farm community, very rural, and I moved away from here for a little while as I went to college and kind of growing up and wanted to be on my own. But then I ended up kind of migrating back to where I was basically raised, and I've lived in the same community for most of my life. And the people around here know my story real well. But starting around 16 years old, I was a basketball player and baseball and football and all those things. And I was in a car accident and ended up breaking my neck. And so I was paralyzed. They actually term would be a quadriplegic. I had no use of any of my body parts temporarily. Fortunately, things began to come back a little bit of time, and my left side of my body recovered fairly quickly, and I got some power back. But the right side was really lagging. And they said that's normal when you break the kind of break I had, which is a C4 and C5 vertebrae. That how, the way the vertebrae works is like one side of your body will lose feeling, and the other side will lose the strength. And so that's kind of what happened in my case. And so I was in a wheelchair for a long time, learning to walk again. I had the halo on to like isolate the neck, and that's a really weird contraption. They call it a halo, but I said, it sounds heavenly, but it's hellish. I mean,
Yeah, I was going to
they take,
say it is.
yeah,
Yeah, that's
isn't it?
not
I mean,
exactly heavenly.
yeah, they take those pins and they actually literally screw them right through your skin down to your skull to hold your head perfectly straight. And so they do that in four areas of around the halo around your head, and it's pretty excruciating. And so anyone that's gone through that, I can relate. That's a very, very difficult thing to do. It's a very painful thing to do, but it's necessary for the, trying to live your life afterwards, right? You're trying to recover. Like breaking an arm, they put a cast on. There's no way to put a cast on your neck. So that's what they have to do. But anyway, so I went through that, and I learned to walk again, and at the time it was really difficult because it was like, well, I can't play organized sports anymore, and I wanted to play college basketball and all these things, and I was actually kind of undersized anyways, but it was the dream, right, of every young guy has. And it turned me though into a new direction, and I ended up like started coaching, and so that led me into an area that I had never considered previously to the injury. And I've ended up coaching for several decades now at all levels of youth sports. And I ran my own varsity girls basketball program, and I hopefully made an impact on a lot of young lives over the years. And it's something that I don't know I would have got into if it wasn't for that injury. And so what I like to always tell people is it seems really difficult at the time, but there might be a reason or an opportunity to reinvent yourself and to relive life in a different way. Sometimes you don't want to do that, right? But sometimes you have to do that. And so I've got plenty more to share, but that's kind of where I would start with the sharing today. And I'd like to share with you actually a little bit about this concept that I've adopted. It's a Japanese term called kintsugi. Have you heard of kintsugi before?
Only when we had our pre-chat. So,
Yeah.
so yeah.
Well, I love to share this because I stumbled across it by accident, and then I was like, wow, this fits so well. So in American culture, let's say you break a ceramic bowl in your kitchen, you drop on the floor and it breaks into these pieces. What is the most likely thing that you, Lisa, would do with that bowl?
If it breaks into pieces, and if it breaks
Yes.
into a ton of pieces, then I would scoop it up and throw it away.
Yeah, I mean, almost everybody would do that, but and if you're creative. Maybe if they're large enough pieces, you might put them back together, right? You might take a shot. So how would you go about doing that if you were going to try to put it back together? Like, what would you use to do that?
Well, if they were, yeah, big enough pieces, then I would
Yeah,
have glue, wouldn't I? I would try to
yeah,
glue it together. No
right.
doubt I would Google and try to find out what glue, but I would try to glue it together and match the pieces so that it looks and fits and like it used to.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I like to talk about. You just hit on everything most people would say. I break something like that, it falls on the floor, it shatters. And I might try to put it back together if I can make it look like it did before, or I'm just going to throw it in the trash otherwise. And that's the American and culture and mindset we all have. But in the Japanese culture, this ancient art form called kintsugi, when the thing breaks, they don't attempt to put it back together the way it was before. They don't attempt to hide the damage. They use a liquid gold and they put it back together, and they don't throw it away. They put it back together. They do their ceramic bowls. They do it with different kind of art forms and things. It's amazing. And when they're done with it, it's beautiful, but it's beautiful in a new way, right? It's not the same as it was. They embrace the shatteredness, they embrace the brokenness through this art form. And so you see all the gold inlaid in all those cracks of the bowl where it had broken before. And it's actually then increased in value. That same bowl might have gone for 10 or $20, is now worth 10 times or at least 8 times the value on the market. So they've not only they put this thing back together and not thrown it away, but they've made something new and beautiful that's more valuable than it was. When I
Awesome.
think about that, isn't that wonderful? I mean, I actually have a picture of one of my live presentations because it's such an amazing impact when you can see that beauty of that bowl being put back together. And think about that with our lives. How a lot of times we get shattered in our own lives and we want to throw it away, whether it's alcohol, drugs, whatever it might be, versus finding a better way to put it back together where our lives can be more beautiful, or beautiful in a new way, I should say. It may not be more beautiful than what it was before because maybe your life was wonderful, but now it can still be beautiful, beautiful in a new way, and maybe more valuable because you've been forced outside your comfort zone and to live life in a way that you wouldn't have otherwise. And so I just think that's a really great, uh, you know, concept, and I love that Kintsugi concept.
It is, it resonates with me, but it's got to resonate with everybody, and definitely the listeners. People listen to the show because it's about loss and grief and healing and hope, and that analogy, and not even an analogy, like what they actually do, is it's so deep. Because I always say, when you have these losses of whatever it is or traumatic experiences, you are, when you go through the healing process, is painful, painstakingly painful, and yet you are new. And I would talk about, like, my daughter who lost her fiance, and my other daughter who lost her brother-in-law, and all of us, they're different, but they're new. They're still at the core of who they are, but they're new, they're different. And I love that. I love that. That is so powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, I really, like I said, I stumbled across that and I thought, wow, this is so impactful and in such a simple way. And I'm just very fortunate to have ran across that because I thought, wow, I can use that to like remind people that life can still have this beauty. And a lot of times we lose sight of that because we're in such pain and such a negative place. And so, yeah, I enjoy that story. But it really hit home too after, March 20th, 2013. I lost my 5-year old son, Seth. It was a bunk bed accident that happened in the home, and it was one of those very unfortunate and very rare occurrences. I thought maybe I was the first one to ever experience that, but unfortunately, I realized there were a few hundred people who have lost their children in that manner, and it really angered me because as a parent, I was never educated about the fact that that could occur. You think of, you're playing on the top bunk, you think of a, you know, a broken arm to falling off or hitting their head or something like that. That's not good, but it's not life threatening per se, or you wouldn't think it would be life threatening in general terms. And so we had left the ladder down, and he was very good about not getting up there. But on that particular day, he apparently had gotten up on the top bunk and he got tangled up, and things happened. And unfortunately, you know, I part of go into detail with that. But the bottom line is, you know, he's no longer with us. And I was at work that day, and my wife was home, and so it was a very traumatic experience for her, thinking he was napping. You know, and just you can imagine how horrifying that was. And it pains me because, you know, she went through something that even I didn't have to go through, and no mother should ever have to experience that, and it shattered her world, you know, and been counseling, and it's been this and it's been that, and it's been almost 11, it'll be 11 years, March 20th. So we're actually recording this prior to that. I don't know what's going to be released, but that's when we're recording this, and so just in a few days it will be 11 years, and life has not been the same since. The bottom line is it's different, and no matter what you want to do or what you think you may, you know, feel, the next day you may feel differently, and you may act differently, and it's just the seasons change, and you think about what you don't have. And you know, losing a child is so different though than losing. I've lost my grandparents, both sets. I've lost my father, you know, a lot of relatives and friends and things as we've gotten older. But the child loss, wow, you know, because I think it's because of the fact that you don't get to see them grow up and do all the things that they should have done. You know, for Seth, he was 5 years old, so he was actually, the day he's supposed to start t-ball practice, little baseball, um, the was the day we had to show him. And so the funeral home was directly across from the baseball fields in our town, and I was going to be coaching his baseball team that year. And so I stood outside that day thinking, you know, that one little road right there in the middle, how life and death is so intertwined. Like we should have been across the field, playing there at the field versus on that side, the wrong side of the road, so to speak. And that really struck me, and really, you know, when I think about often how life is just so, uh, what I want to say, unpredictable, I guess is the word I'm looking for, but you just don't know day to day.
Mm. No, you know, it's one of those things where you think, what on earth could someone possibly say? And there aren't anything, there is nothing to say. You're right. The thought of any parent losing a child, it's out of order. There are DNA. There, that is, it's not supposed to happen, right? I mean, this is
Right.
out of order and what you and your wife have gone through. And I mean, yeah, that is one thing you know, when we had first talked, I thought my girls were in a bunk bed. Like I had one, you know, growing up. Like it's one of those things where you do think, yeah, don't fall off and break your arm. And I just can't even begin, you know, to imagine what you guys have endured. Really, it feels like you know, I've endured this loss, and the fact that you were going to coach his team. I mean, my dad was my coach. I talked him into it. Listen, Tim, I talked my dad into coaching my baseball team when I was 7, I think, and he knew nothing about baseball. And I begged and I begged and I begged. And then I begged my best friend because I was going to be the only girl and I love sports. So I begged her. And a week before I was supposed to my play was the first practice, I broke my arm and then I was out the whole season. So my dad's like, great, thanks for that, you know. Um,
Now I got a coach without you.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Now I'm just sitting on the side. My best friend's really pissed off at me because now she's the only girl, and I'm over there like, oops. And I think when you said that, I was like, I just can't even begin. I just can't even begin to imagine this heartache.
Yeah, you know, I worked with the Consumer Product Safety Commission in America to try to get them to bring that in and like have some stringent, requirements, because I found out when I did my research that there weren't really any real requirements per se. There was voluntary requirements, so to speak, but those are voluntary. They weren't absolute by like Congress didn't enact this or that or the other. And I found it was like pulling teeth because of the fact that it's all about money, the bottom line. And so we had a local news story on our situation, and the TV station picked it up. And one of his comments to me, so he did his own research, of course, as a news reporter. And one of his comments I'll never forget really floored me because I had been working with the Consumer Product Safety Commission as well. They told him, they said that the loss was insignificant. That was the term they used. My son's loss was insignificant because the numbers didn't add up to enough children being injured or dying as a result of this deficiency that they weren't going to do anything about it, essentially. And that's just traumatizing to me to think not only do they not do anything about it, but they're not educating the public about these problems. And so that was really a hard time for me. I was reliving the nightmare over and over as I went through this process, trying to explain and describing the bunk bed, and model and the make and, all those things. And what I am finding though is like the newer models, just so everybody knows, the newer models are not as unsafe. There's a lot of things they've changed in them over the years, but this was a model that was probably, now it's probably 20 years old or so. But it was one of the older ones. So there's those gaps between the edge of the bed and the wall where the kids can fall down and get caught. And there was the extensions with the high poles that you'd like to hang your hats on and stuff, things like that. Those kids can get caught up on those types of things. And so a lot of those, you don't see those designs these days, but they're still out there. They've been handed down over the years. And so you need to be aware that there are some safety concerns and just be very careful. And there's a reason they say, a certain age and over. It's about the size of the body and all those things that none of us would even realize that that's why. We just, oh yeah, well, they're going to fall and get hurt. We'll just watch them. It'll be okay. That's what we
Yeah.
think. And so I do have to say too, as a father, it was a tough road because the fact that in your mind, you're the protector, you're the go-getter, you're the one that leads the family. And so even though I wasn't home when the actual accident occurred, I really blame myself a lot because like, why did I allow that? Why didn't I know better? Why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do that? Like, why did I work that late that day? Why wasn't I home for dinner? Like all those questions that we all know in reality, that's not had no bearing, but yet in your mind it does. And so you're blaming yourself. I know my wife was blaming herself, of course. Why didn't I check on him sooner? Or why didn't I do this? Why did I do that? Well, he looks back in his room, plays all the time, and he falls asleep in the afternoon. Like that's just a normal kid thing. So of course you didn't think anything about it. But you do blame yourself, and whether it's right or wrong, that's human nature.
Yeah, 100%. And, guilt and grief go hand in hand, like a married couple is what I usually tell people. It's either anger and grief, guilt and grief, both and all. So absolutely. And like you said, it's just a normal day. Like these are things that just any of us would do, or not go check on because they're just sleeping or they're just playing or they're doing what they normally do. And you're going to work. Like this is like normal daily activity. And it, thank you so much for sharing because not only are you sharing your story, but you're also educating. I know when you share your story and the work that you've done in educating. And can you tell me what what have you done as far as you had mentioned your wife going to therapy, or did you get counseling? What is it that any kind of tools that you have done to kind of, I mean, the fact that you're even putting one foot in front of the other is amazing. So what did you do?
It's funny you ask that because I'm actually going to be meeting with another father here in a few weeks. I think a couple Sundays from now. He recently lost his child and he's really struggling, and he went to counseling, then he quit, and he doesn't know where to turn. And so I reached out to another father who I know who had lost his son. And so both of us are going to get together with this new father and kind of walk him through some things and kind of have those conversations. which I'm really interested to see where that leads. So maybe I'm being called to talk to dad. I don't know, but we're gonna see how that goes. But for me, I have a lot of regrets on how I handled it because I was so caught off my own pain that I didn't go to counseling with my wife. And she had asked, she said, I want you and Allie, our daughter, to go with me. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want to go to counseling. All right, I'm a man. Men don't go to counseling. So what men do is we bury ourselves in our work, we keep our mind busy, and we shut off, and we don't share our emotions, and then that leaves the wife and the mother to fend for herself, and that's where I think she tries to get it through counseling and her friends and other avenues, and that's where a lot of marriages fall apart because you go different directions as a result of the situation, and you lose contact. And we weren't heading there per se, but we were really struggling. We were struggling as a family. My daughter was on her own with her friends, and I'm doing mine, and my wife's doing hers. And I remember I'd written a Snuggle Time game, a children's book. And at this point, this is a little down the road, of course, but it was months down, or maybe a year down or so. But I remember I went to a church and I was talking to the pastor who was really interested in the story and the book and wanted to see about getting it for his young kids in the church and everything. And he stopped me and he said, "Let me ask you a question." He said, "While you're off creating this wonderful book and you're putting all this time and effort and you're doing these things," he said, "Where's your wife?" And it stopped me in my tracks because I didn't expect that. And it turned out before he was a pastor, he was actually a family counselor. So he had the background to know to ask that question. And he hit that on. He's like, you need to step back and think about that, because no matter what you do with this book, is it worth it if you don't have your wife there? Because I guarantee she's struggling. And so that was a very profound moment for me because it was true. I had been going full go ahead while she's still way back 10 steps, 20 steps behind with her suffering. And again, she was suffering in a different way. And so that was the moment I kind of stepped back, but I never really had counseling. I never really had it. For me, my counseling was I formed a Facebook page and I love to write and I put all my words out there. And in fact, I just posted something a little bit ago just because I'm feeling things this time of year. And I'm not the kind of person that's intensely going out there saying, look at me. But I like to share what my emotions when I'm feeling it. And I like to put in words. I don't want to sit here and talk to you about necessarily what I'm feeling those moments, but in those really dark, deep, meaningful moments, that's when I get out the pen and paper or the typewriter or whatever I'm using, the keyboard, and I try to capture those moments. And so for me, my counseling, if you will, was writing those words over and over. And so that was how I survived it. And that's not for everybody, but there is a correlation there. They do say that, writing and journaling is a great mechanism. And for me, it was probably my saving grace, if you will.
Mm. I'm so glad that you shared that because there's so many different modalities and there's so many different ways that we handle grief. And I was never a writer. And then after I lost my dad, he was the first loss, it started just flowing out of me. And that is something that I think is so important to share because somebody may be listening going, well, I've tried counseling, it's not for me, or I've tried this and it's not for me, but oh my God, I love writing and I never thought of this, or they'll connect going, yeah, Tim, I totally get it. I do the same thing. And
Yeah.
so you had mentioned this book, it's Seth's Snuggle Time Game.
Hmm.
Is that the book? Amazing.
So the book came about. It was really crazy how this happened. So after the accident in the home, we had gone to the hospital that night and gone through all that traumatic, moments and events. And my wife said, I can't go back in the home. I just can't. Not with that being, and it was so fresh. And so my mom lives just a few miles down the road in the same town. And so we went and stayed with her. And for the first 3 nights, I couldn't sleep. Like my wife, she slept with one of her sisters in the bedroom. I tried to lay down with her at first. I just couldn't do it. I just wasn't there. And so I ended up being the one that would sit up in the living room all night long and just sit there and stare at the TV, and the TV wouldn't even be on. I'd just be staring at the screen, right? And all these thoughts. And um, I would go into like what I say is a dark place. It was like just nothing. It was like just a dark room, like the dead of night is what I would be looking at. And it felt good because all day long you were crying, you were emotional, and people were coming by the house and constant, barrage of different things. And so when I would get into what I called my dark world, I loved it because there was no feelings. It was emotionless. It was just this void, but it was my shelter away from the world. So deep in the night, I love those moments of just sitting there and it being nothing, no pain, no nothing. And it was really a place I was retreating to, if you will. It's almost like a meditative state, kind of thing.
Mm.
And so the next morning it would all start over again. And I also realized real quickly, like, if I didn't go to sleep, I was numb. I didn't cry. I didn't have the emotional breakdowns I would have. Like I was exhausting myself because I didn't want to sleep. I was afraid to sleep, wake up and go through it again, and face the reality. And so for the first 2 nights I did that. And then on the third night, my body was just exhausted. And I should say too, during this time, I was raised as a Christian, and I'm fighting with God, and I'm calling him some names that, I probably should not repeat. And I was saying some things about, yeah, whatever, you can imagine. And on that third night, I hadn't obviously got any answers. I finally fell asleep, but it was like maybe 2 hours. It was like 4 o'clock and 5 o'clock in the morning. I woke right back up. I fell asleep like 2 or 3. I mean, it was just an instant like full nap. But I woke up with these visions in my mind, and it was of me and Seth and all the things that we did, and it was like a life flash, if you will. And I was picturing the playing a ball in the backyard and all these hundreds of different things. And then I kind of settled in on this one specific um, connection we had where every night he would come in and he wanted to play his snuggle time game. And what it would be is at the end of the day, he would come to me and I might be on the couch, maybe watching TV or reading the news or whatever. And he'd say, "Hey, Dad, you know what time it is?" And I would say, "Time for you to clean your room." He'd be like, "No, no, Dad, it's not time to clean them. You know what time it is." And I'd be like, "Oh, it's time for you to get a job." Like, "No, Dad, I'm 5. I'm only 5." And we just play banter back and forth like that. And then eventually he would get me to say, "Is it snuggle time?" And he'd say, "Yes." And he'd be all excited and he'd get up my lap and he'd hug on me and sit and we'd read a book or just watch TV together or whatever until he got drowsy and was ready to, like, for his bedtime. And it was just a nice connection moment for him and I. And it was something we did most every night. I would say it was nightly as long as we were home and, time allowed. And so that was what I settled in on in that moment in time. And the night before, before I went to, before my wife went to sleep, I didn't plan on going to sleep, but she said, "I think you're gonna get your sign tonight." And I didn't believe in that kind of thing. I'm like I'm very scientific. I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not gonna get a sign. That's crazy talk." And then I had this vision, right? And it ended up turning into a book eventually. But she gets up the next morning, she says, "Did you get your sign?" And I said, "No, I didn't get a sign." Like I never thought of it as anything more than had some thoughts in my head. But so that same morning, I go out to the house to get some clothes and a change of clothing, and I wanted to shower in my own shower and pet my dogs and all those things. And she just said, "I'm not ready. I can't go yet." I said, "That's okay. I'll get your stuff too, and I'll bring it back to you." And her sister Linda was staying at our house, kind of house sitting. And I walk out of the shower and I got changed. I got the clothes and I was thinking about leaving. I petted the dogs. And she said, "Have you gotten your sign yet?" And my reaction is, what is with these weird sisters? Like, how are they raised, right? Like, this is crazy talk. And she said, "I think you're going to right now." And I looked out the back window and there's this cardinal, beautiful, bright red cardinal sitting there looking in the window directly at me from the pine tree in the backyard. And it just kind of drew me out. And I went out and I had this interaction with this little red bird. It was the craziest thing of my life, where it was just chirping up a storm. And I tried to get closer. I was going to take a picture of it. So all I was going to do is show my wife, "Hey, this is kind of cool. Look, this bird that appeared at the house." And then he kind of like stopped chirping and he jumped a couple branches and kind of got me to follow him a little bit. So I'm trying to go back and forth with this bird where I don't want to scare him away, but yet I'm trying to get a picture. And he's chirping at me, and then he would like stop and watch me, and he'd jump a few branches and move around. And the next thing I know, we're clear down the tree line, and he stops and he starts chirping like crazy, like he's just going nuts. I've never seen a cardinal act that way before. And then in my mind, I heard, look down. And I looked down, and right between my feet was a baseball. And that weekend before Seth had passed, he had lost a baseball in the backyard that he was playing with. And he was freaked out because he's like, Dad's going to be so mad. We have a bucket of baseballs at our house, and Dad's going to be upset. I can't find the baseball. Allie, you can help me find the baseball. Dad's going to be mad at me. And they never found it. And so this bird had kind of somehow led me down to this baseball, and I picked it up, and I'm like, is that my sign? And that was the moment where I thought maybe I don't know everything. Maybe we can't explain everything. I was, like I said, I was so against those things, and now I embrace them because I do feel like we get moments, and it was life changing moment right there. And by the way, so that Snuggle Time game got turned into a book, but also Cardinal is on every page of that book as well, and people wouldn't realize what the story behind that is or why it's in there. We just made it into a little game like go back and count all the Cardinals, kind of like where's Waldo, if you will. And so we just incorporated it into the Snuggle Time game. So you got the Snuggle Time game to learn how to play it like he did, but also find the Cardinals. And there's actually a direct correlation between the two that the average person wouldn't realize.
That's amazing. I mean, that is amazing. I mean, for those who are listening, they can't see your background, but I see the When the Cardinal Calls and Seth Snuggle Time game photo behind you. Um, and yeah, when you were talking, it was like I was just getting these floods of chills coming out because I know we had talked about this in our pre chat was I came from that same, like, this does not happen. Like, this is crazy. People are crazy when they think of that. And especially if you were raised in the church, like, oh, this is like almost like satanic. And I had my psychic medium friend on, and her episode just launched, and we were talking about signs and synchronicities and things that they just no way would that happen. It's never happened before, it hasn't happened since, and that very moment, that is a crazy story. So I'm certain that you think, right, there is more to this than we actually know in our human, just in our small minds. So what a powerful sign that he is with you, almost like saying, there's the ball, Dad, look down, there's the ball, I lost it.
Yeah, that's
Wow.
exactly what it felt like in that moment. And not only that, but I also had to eat some crow and be like, okay, these crazy sisters aren't so crazy after all. They know more than I do apparently. I don't know.
Exactly. Now you have to go back with the tail between your legs and go, yep, you aren't crazy. That's
Yeah, exactly.
amazing.
Well, you talk about synchronicity, and I'll share with you really quickly a story also. So after Seth died, there was a good friend of ours. Our daughter was the same age as their daughter. That's kind of like one of those you get to know people that way. And Brian was checking on us constantly, even after everyone else quit checking on us. He was one of the few that was still sending a text or an email or a message of some type or checking in. Just really sweet person, wonderful. But he had his own demons and his own struggles that I knew nothing about. And a few years later, he actually ended up committing suicide.
Mm.
And so he left behind his wife and his two daughters. And so it was like a couple things here. One, it was his wife had gotten my wife to eat her first bite after Seth died. Like she wouldn't eat until Heather got her to eat. And then I'm sitting in the house that day watching as now my wife is getting Heather to eat her first bite after her husband's passed. And it's that really like stuck with me. And but to make the long story short, one of the things that was really amazing was we went down to Florida together to get away and kind of have a little vacation as two families who were suffering still. And we ended up getting a hotel room, and I actually had gone out for a work conference too. So I said, I'll pay for the hotel room, and we can stay together, get a big enough room we can share, and it's what it costs. And we got to the hotel room, and the number of the hotel room was 1007, 1007, and or 1107. 1107 is what it was. And 1107 was the date that Brian had passed, the father. And in the middle of that was the number 10, which is our number with Seth. And I was like, two families combined out of all those rooms in the hotel to find a meaningful number, not only for one family, but for both. those are the kinds of things that I think we overlook. But if you really think about it, they're all around us. And now some people could say, well, that's just a coincidence or it's just silly. But 1107 was the date, and I never thought about the fact that Seth's number was right in there. And the day that we buried um, Ryan was actually also Seth's birthday. So there was a lot of synchronicity and correlation there between the two families, and it was just mind blowing how those things may work.
Yeah. Wow. So powerful. And in that kind of the you and your wife and your daughter and the all family and friends have had such a significant loss with Seth, and now it's as if you've turned around and looked back, and you and your wife are helping this other family that you're close to come alongside you. And that's a beautiful thing that you guys were able to do. And listen, when we talk about finding meaning, we would always want our children back, our loved ones back versus finding meaning. I would rather have, and you'd rather, of course, have your son back than learning all these things and finding all this meaning. Just
Yeah.
that this is the reality of what's happened, and the fact that you guys did that, and I'm certain continue to do that, is a beautiful testimony. And I wonder, so we know that you write, and we know that you've written a book. What, where are you at now? Like, what is it that you're doing now? I think you have a podcast, and so tell me what you're doing now.
I have a podcast. I haven't been very as loyal with it as I should be. Like I'm kind of experimenting with it, if you will. And so I've done some podcast episodes. I've got them out there, and I'm trying to do some new ones and start releasing again. But I started essentially this uh, thing called Faith Beyond, and it's off of the fact that the tagline was is faith beyond, beyond the pain, beyond the adversity, beyond this life, faith beyond. And so a lot of people will think that it's just, oh, he's talking about God and church and all these things, and that they label that. But it's way deeper than that. It's about finding faith beyond the four walls of any church or any one religion. It's, finding yourself and your connection. Because I feel like my connection with God is much different than what I thought of as a Christian growing up. It's much deeper, it's more profound. And when I get beyond the human-esque part of it, and I can have a personal relationship and feel that inner being that I'm being pulled to, then I feel like it's much deeper and it's much more meaningful. I mean, I can go sit in the church on Sunday mornings every single week and not have a connection, but I'm feeling good because I'm sitting in church Sunday morning, everybody sees me, right? And so I'm saying there's a difference there between having that true connection with something more than yourself versus just being part of a general religion. And don't get me wrong, like people think that they think that I'm saying that religion's not good. I think religion's great, but it may not be where you are in your life, or you may need a different type of like feel. So I've been studying religions from around the world for the last several years, and whether it's Hinduism or Buddhism or any of the Sikhism. There's so many isms out there, but the Jewish faith, the Muslim faith, and not only that, the different sects of Christianity, and not only that, but going back even farther and saying, where did Christianity come from? When you start digging into the history, you start having a lot more questions about, like, why do we say this in the church now when you go back to this time, this is what we were saying, and now if that was the word, why is it like, you ask these questions and you educate yourself, and I don't think a lot of people do that, and so they just accept what's told to them, and they may or may not be right. But here's the point I would make. So I look at it, faith beyond, going beyond all of that noise and just finding a way to connect. And a lot of that's through whether it's meditation or different things, but it's not anti-religion. It's not also all about religion. It's about being more than just a single religion, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the fact that you've gone down that path, and it's different than what you were raised in and what you had believed, takes me back to that pot that was shattered, and then gold is being use to put it together, and it's different and new and more valuable. And it seems your life is a perfect example of that. And it'll be so interesting to hear where you go next, as far as helping others, if that's the direction you go in. I mean, I know you will continue to do that, but who knows? I mean, who knows what will happen? Um, Now, if people want to, which they will want to contact you, how can people find you, Tim? And also, is your book on Amazon? Like, how can people find your book? We'll put all the details in the show notes, but can you just let us know how people can find you?
Sure, you can go on Amazon to find the Seth's Snuggle Time Game. And it might even be called Seth's, it might be called Snuggle Game, Snuggle Time Game. There's some different versions of the way it was worded, unfortunately. So I've been trying to clean that up. But it's out there. You can find it there, along with my full story, When the Cardinal Calls, which is actually from the first day he died all the way through to a certain point in time a while back now. But it kind of outlines in that book the story that I shared with you about getting with Heather and her family and going to Florida and all the different signs that we had. So it kind of talks about my struggle a little bit, but also it's intertwined with some additional signs I didn't share today that we experienced, because there was a lot of them. There was a lot of them. I had to like wade through like which ones I thought were actual signs versus which ones were just me like wanting to be like, So I try to be real selective about that. But that story is really that's out there as well, and it's interesting. And you can find me at timmaceyko.com. That is my personal website. I'm working on a faithbeyond.org website that I haven't released yet. If you check that out, it's just going to go to like coming soon page, because I'm trying to work through like the social media pages for it. I'm working with a couple of people right now. I'm trying to raise some money and probably establish an internet radio station for Faith Beyond. So that may be coming here in the near future. I'm not 100% on that one yet, so I don't want to say, yeah, go check out my radio station. But the idea would be to like the uplifting music and positive message music, whether it's Christian music or country or pop or whatever. But the station would be built around, positive music, a lot of retro type stuff in my mind, and then interviews and discussions like the one we're having today about having faith beyond the pain and the adversity we face. So I'm really excited about the future and where I'm heading. I'm still kind of a work in progress, if you will. Right? I'm still being molded and being led, and I don't know where that's going to end up quite yet, but I'm excited about it.
Yeah. Well, we're all work in progress. And if we ever get to, be complete, that's because we've ended our journey here on earth, because we're all in progress. But the fact that you're taking such a hideous pain and loss and helping others and being a voice and offering hope is exactly what the world needs. And no doubt people who are listening, who need to hear this, you are the example of hope. So thank you so much for being a part of the show and sharing your story, Tim.
Yeah, I really enjoy being here and talking with you, and I love what you're doing. So keep up good work.
Thank you.